when he was buying a used car just out of kicks, he Carfaxed it, and it said the car had never been in a wreck and had been totaled 3 times. I don't really trust that stuff anymore. And to add insult to injury, last week I had a customer, they were looking for a Toyota Corolla. They found one at a Ford dealer used car lot. So they brought it over here, and the Ford dealer gave them the Carfax thing that said it hadn't been wrecked. Well, the first thing I did was jack it up in the air and saw that all the plastic stuff on the undercarriage was ripped off, torn. Some of it, half of it was missing, and they cut the other half so it didn't drag on the ground anymore. And when I looked at the radiator support, I found that half of the latch was painted white and the other half was the factory black. Obviously the car had been wrecked and repainted, but the Carfax said it had never been wrecked. And they had a stupid sticker right on the window that said as is, no warranty. So the Ford used car dealer there was doing a double protection. They put a little sticker on it that says as is, no warranty. But they also handed Carfax that said it hadn't been in a wreck. So even you could show it was in a wreck and any fool could find that out. The Ford dealer just had to say, oh look, our sticker said there's no warranty, that we didn't inspect it. But the Carfax said it wasn't wrecked. So if you want to sue somebody, sue Carfax, because they told us it hadn't been wrecked. You really don't want to deal with any of this stuff when you're buying a used car. And on top of it all, they were asking an ungodly sum for this car. They wanted like $11,000 for a car that had 120,000 miles, had been wrecked, and even the body itself had a lot of paint chips on it because when they did the body work, it had been a while back, but a lot of the paint that they put on it chipped and flaked off. So they were asking an outrageous amount of money for a car that wasn't even in that good shape cosmetically. But here again, the Ford dealer, used car, they understood, hey, it's a Toyota Corolla. These things are easy to sell. Everybody wants them. And they're just stacking it up the highest they could possibly ask for it. Hope some fool pays that much. And if they don't, then over the course of weeks, they'll lower the price until somebody buys it. And of course, at most used car lots are trying to sell you these extended warranty packages. Now, Consumer Reports showed that in the United States, over 55% of the people who bought these policies never used them, never made a claim, yet the average cost was $1,300. So there's $1,300 that you'll never see again, and even if you need to use it. I had a customer, they had one of these, the engine went out, they tried to use it, and the warranty company said the engine was damaged when you bought it. We don't pay for pre-existing conditions, so they didn't get the engine repaired, which would have cost thousands of dollars for free, because they said, oh, that's a pre-existing condition, we don't pay for that. Now, of course, you want to have a mechanic like myself check out a used car before you buy it. That's the best insurance. But don't think that these warranty policies, which are just insurance policies, are going to cover all kinds of stuff. They don't care about you. And are you really going to take them to court over something? They know how much money that costs, and if they deny a claim, you know, take them to court, sure, but who wants to deal with that nonsense in the first place? And another reason not to buy from a used car dealer is a lot of them have these certified pre-owned cars that they certified. Well, who certified it? They certified it themselves. And that reminds me of one of the craziest things I ever saw. I had gone to a Toyota dealer for a customer who was buying a used car there. And I'm checking it out in the parking lot, and I find out that the thing is 2 quarts low on oil. So I told him, I said, well, my customer's not going to buy this car. It's an oil burner. It's 2 quarts low on oil. And this vehicle had a sign on it that said, certified pre-owned car. They told me, oh, well, we haven't serviced it yet. Don't worry, we're going to service it. Which I told them, it's too late now, buddy. I see the car's 2 quarts low on oil. That means it's burning oil. I looked around, it wasn't leaking. It was burning oil. Previous owner didn't take care of it. Now it's too late. The engine's been damaged, so my customer did not buy the car. And this was one that said certified pre-owned. You know, once they change the oil's clean, you're not going to know that it's an oil burner until you buy it, and then you're stuck with it. And even if you had some kind of warranty, I've seen these warranties, they say stuff like, well, guaranteed against excessive oil consumption. Well, what's excessive oil consumption? To me, if I bought a car and it burns any oil, that's excessive. I don't want that car. All those things have so many exclusions they can get away with. Not a good idea to buy from these pros. They paid anywhere from 30 to 50% generally of what they're selling it for. Well, they bought that from somebody. Why don't you buy it from somebody yourself and save? I actually used to know a guy that did that for a living. He told people that he would buy their new car, because he knew how to negotiate, so he could save a few thousand buying a new car for him, as long as they gave him their used car at the dealer trade-in value. So he got the cars at that price, which is cheap. Then mainly, he had a used car business where he would then take those cars he got cheap and sell them at a higher price at his used car lot. So buying from a private individual, hey, much better idea, really, because hey, when somebody needs money, cars that might go for $6,000 on the street, you go to say, what, to trade it in? Or I just want to trade the car and not buy another car like a CarMax? Ha, they're going to probably offer you $2 or $3 grand for the car. So when the shoe is on the other foot and you're buying a used car, take advantage of that and buy a good used car from a private individual. Because as I said, the dealers are professionals. But I've had plenty of customers buy used cars from private individuals. Those people, the private individuals they bought them from, they don't know all that much about cars, and they just got tired of the car because, oh, well, they need to fix this and that, and they want another car. Now, I'm not saying you can get a Celica like this for $350 like I did. The customer was tired of the car, and yeah, the bumper was all yellow because she'd had it painted at high school, and it all came off. The paint, the yellow underneath was there. So I had to get my body guy to paint it and stuff. There are some deals out there in the real world, but you're not going to find them at dealerships. When I bought that Celica, then my son, who lived at home back then, he was going to college, he wanted a Celica too, so I started looking around. Well, comparable cars like mine that I bought for $350, they wanted like $9,500 at the Toyota dealer at their used car lot because, oh, it's a Celica, and even though it was 20 years old, oh, it's a sports car, and these are really good cars. And sure, I got a deal on this one for $350, but they're selling something for almost 30 times what I paid for this car. You're never going to get a real deal at one of these used car lots. But if you have to buy from a used car lot, if you do one thing and one thing only, tell them you want to see a clean title. You don't want to get one that's a reconditioned title or salvage title. It meant the insurance company had totaled it, because they buy tons of those and then fix them as cheap as they can and sell them. Which is why I tell people, don't go to these car auctions either, unless you're a pro, because the pros at the car lots, they might go with 10 grand, they might buy 5 or 6 cars, and they might sell each one of them for $5,000 or $6,000, so even if they get 2 or 3 lemons, they're still making a whole bunch of money. But you're only buying one car at an auction. It's a lemon, you're stuck with it. So stay away from car auctions too if you're buying a used car that you can use as an everyday driver. I'm always being asked by my customers and by you viewers, Scotty, should I buy a used car from a car rental agency? And my answer is generally no. I would not buy a used car from a car rental agency. And my first reason for not wanting to buy a car that came from a car rental company has to do with me and other people who rent cars all the time.
Wondering why your check engine light is on?
Well, this is a new gadget. It's called Fix.
When I travel distances, I don't have time to drive. I fly in a plane, then I rent a car. And when I rent cars, generally, I beat the heck out of them. I'm in a hurry. I don't care what kind of roads I go on. I really don't care where I park the car. They're not taken care of by the drivers all that much. Rental cars often take large beatings over a couple of years. Hundreds of people probably rent each individual car. Who knows how they drive, how they took care of it, if they hit curbs, if they backed up into stuff. And here's a big thing that a lot of people might not understand, but they're going to find out now. Most major car rental places, they're self-insured. They insure themselves. They're so big, they save money that way. But it can be a bad thing if you're buying a used one from them. If you're self-insured, hey, they handle it all in-house. What happens is, if it's been in a wreck, you may never find out. Do a Carfax. If it didn't go through an insurance company, Carfax isn't going to have any information on, oh, gee, it was wrecked and then they fixed it. They do that all in-house. I had a customer, bought a Mazda from one of these car rental places. About a year later, he got in a little wreck, and his body man said, hey, look at this. This car's been in a big wreck before because it's got an aftermarket bumper on it. It's not the Mazda bumper. Well, he was never told that the car had been in a wreck, but unfortunately for the car rental company, my customer was a lawyer. He was going to sue him, and they said, what do you want? And he says, well, you know, I want the money back I paid for the car, and I'm going to keep the car. And so that's what they gave him. But still, that was a car that had been in a wreck. And if you take a big company like, say, Hertz Last I checked, they had over 400,000 cars that they were renting out in the United States. That's a lot of cars, and a lot of stuff can fall under the cracks. I wouldn't advise anybody to buy one of those cars myself. And that actually brings me to another reason not to buy a car from them. They're priced way too high. They're all done by their bookkeepers to say, well, we depreciated this much of this. And if they say want $22,500 for the car, that's what they're going to ask. And they won't accept anything less. They're selling cars and they said, these cars go for this kind of money. We don't take anything less. And as I said in a previous video, $2,500 for the car, that's what they're going to ask. And they won't accept anything less. They're selling cars and they said, these cars go for this kind of money. We don't take anything less. And as I said in a previous video, the book value of cars is artificially inflated in the United States. The companies that make these book ratings of what cars are worth are now owned by companies that sell used cars. So it's a very corrupt system. Take England. In England, used cars are much cheaper than the United States because they don't have such a corrupt system as they do here in the United States. To give you an analogy, go to a jeweler, show them a diamond ring, get it appraised, and then say, okay, what will you give me for that? Well, they're going to give you tons less because they want to sell it and make a bunch of money. So it's to their advantage that the sales price for them is really high, even though the actual value is much lower. And with these car rental companies, like I said, they say one low price, what a bunch of nonsense, the money that they want to get, and if you don't want it, hey, they won't sell it to you. Because in reality, used cars are used. Anything that's used, as far as I'm concerned, has whatever value anybody will pay for it. There is no actual value set in stone. And considering that you'd be buying a used car that had been driven by hundreds of different people and the price is really high, that's not fair. If you buy a car from a one-owner car, he took care of it, he's thinking, well, I'm going to keep it for a while, I'm going to sell it, so I'm going to take good care of it, fine. But if you're buying a car that's been driven by hundreds of different people at a really high price, it's just not a smart thing to do. The rental car companies get a big deal. I mean, look at Hertz. If they own over 400,000 cars that they're renting out, they're going to cut a pretty tight deal on what they're going to pay for these cars. So my friend who worked at the Chevy factory said, hey, we all knew the next 5,000 were going to rental cars, so we didn't have to be that great on the fit and the finish because it wasn't being bought by a private individual who might look at the car, examine it, make sure everything's okay. It's being sold in a fleet to a rental car company. Let's face it, even when you rent a car, when you bring it back, there's usually a very cursory check of the car when you bring it back. Especially guys like me, if I fly out early in the morning and it's 5 o'clock in the morning and you drive it in, guy just kind of looks around the car and checks the mileage and sees it's full of gas, and that's it. And personally, I have to vouch on this. They seem to be cheaper made, the ones that are sent to the rental car companies, because I rented a car once in Wisconsin. Well, I got in the car and closed the door on the inside one time, and a couple of screws fell out on my lap from the dash when I closed the door. I guess they weren't so prideful in Indiana when they made that rental car. If these rental car companies are cutting the best deal that they can, but the company's making them thinking, well, they really cut us down, we're not making much profit, so let's whip these things out as fast as we can. Heck, over the decades I've been renting cars, I had cars where the dashes weren't even glued in right, they were crooked. A lot of them had much more rattles than normal cars that my customers had in them, even though they were low mileage when I was renting them. And if you're looking at buying a used one, say of a model that's notorious for having transmission problems, people who are renting them, they're driving the heck out of them. They don't care that the transmission's weak. It's not their car. A private individual owns one. Odds are they're going to take better care. They're not going to drive it as fast, taking chances with the transmission by over-revving it and stuff. But when it's a rental car, hey, that stuff happens all the time. So if you got a relatively weak transmission to begin with, and you're buying a rental car with that, hey, I've had many customers have that happen, and the transmissions went out within a couple of years of them buying the vehicle. And of course, another reason I say not to buy them is the maintenance factor. Guys who are mechanics for the car rental companies, they don't get paid like regular mechanics do at a dealership.
Feel more connected to every fleeting moment. The Mazda CX-30 2.5 Turbo. More power for your pursuit. The seductive styling of the 2023 Mazda CX-9 elevates your idea of what a three-row CUV can be.
Find an exceptional lease today at Gunther Mazda.
As an example, last I checked, they were paying about $33,000 a year for the mechanics at Hertz. While the Ford mechanics, they were getting paid on average about $47,000 a year. So not only are the mechanics at the rental car places being paid less, they have to work on all the different kinds of cars that the company buys. Where, say a guy's working at a Ford dealership, he's only working on Fords. He has all the specialized equipment at the Ford garage, and of course he's going to do a better job. He's getting paid more, he has better equipment, and people can tout all they want. Oh, we have service records for it. It's paperwork. It means nothing. I've been in many rental cars where the maintenance lights were on. When I checked the oil was low because they hadn't changed it regularly enough. Hey, paperwork doesn't mean anything. Anybody can fill out paperwork. What's actually done, that could be another story entirely. But let's say you're in a pinch and you got to get a car fast. Well, let's face it, they got a lot of late model cars. And yes, you're going to overpay. They charge too much for them. But let's say you're looking at a Toyota Corolla. You're looking at a really bulletproof car. I've got customers with them. They have 200,000-300,000 miles, and basically all they ever did in the cars was change the oil and filter and the brake pads when they wore out, and they're still running strong. So they can take a lot of abuse before they fall apart. So if you're hard pressed to find a decent car, maybe get a Toyota Corolla from one of these. But please, don't go buy a Chrysler from one of these things. They're bad enough new, and you buy one that's been driven by hundreds of people. Who I had a customer do that once with a Sebring, and that car just fell apart in the first year that he owned it. And if you are going to buy a used car from a rental car company, you pay a guy like me, a professional mechanic, to check it out before you buy. Because as I say, as they're self-insured, it might have been in a wreck, you're never going to be able to find out. But a good mechanic, hey, we can find that stuff out. When I'm checking out a used car, first thing I do is go all around with a flashlight and look for mismatched paint where I can see, hey, this black part's got a little white on it, and it's a white car. Obviously, it's been wrecked and repainted. We can find that stuff pretty fast. And of course, don't listen to anything the salesman says. I've done that for customers and showed them that, look, this car was obviously in a wreck, and they go back and they say, oh, your mechanic's crazy. Oh, look, the paperwork shows it's never been in a wreck. Well, like I said, paperwork, anybody can make up paperwork. Actually obvious that the car's been in a wreck, you don't buy it. And you can't trust anybody these days, so you have a mechanic check it out before you buy. You can tell paint imperfections, and if you see, gee, this fender's a little different color than the hood, you'll know it's been wrecked. Then you walk away from that car right away and start looking at the other ones. A lot of times right before they sell them, they do all the cosmetic stuff. So let's say you're looking to buy one, use your nose too, because if you smell fresh paint all over the place, you know they've touched it all up and they painted it all over just to sell it to you. And then you might find a year later all that paint starts to fade off because they didn't do such a hot job. They just want to get them to look as shiny as possible on the outside and unload them as fast as they can because they have hundreds of thousands of them that they have to get rid of. My advice is stay away from buying a used car from a rental car lot. Now, I'm a big proponent of buying used cars. CarMax only sells used cars. But there's one main reason you buy a used car, and that is to save money. And CarMax, their prices are way too high. Thousands of dollars more than you can find at many other places. I had a customer a couple years ago, bought a 5-year-old car from CarMax. It had 60,000 something miles on it, and they only saved $4,000 off of what a brand new one would have cost. I mean, really, if you can buy a car that's 5 years old and has 60-something thousand miles on it, and all you're saving is $4,000 on a $25,000 to $30,000 car, you might as well just go out and buy a brand new one. Some of my own customers, they balked at the prices, and I've even met professionals that said, I don't know how they do it at CarMax, but they charge so much more for their cars and get away with it. Yes, CarMax is a big corporation. In 2018, net sales and operating revenues of over $17 billion. Yes, billion. So it's a gigantic company. So they have lots of cars. But therein lies a lot of the problems. Those used cars have to come from somewhere. They have to keep turning over, getting more and more and more and more. So obviously they don't know that much about the cars that they're selling to you. That's the big rub is, when you buy a used car, you really want to know, where did that car come from? Who drove it? Now I know that CarMax sells cars that were previously rental cars because I've had customers buy